Mr. President, thank you. It's Thursday, and I'm back on the Senate floor partaking in one of my favorite times of the week, which is to come down on the floor and talk about somebody who's making a great difference in my state. We call these individuals our Alaskan of the Week. And to those who watch the floor or back home, sometimes we break the rules a little bit and recognize more than one person. We just call them the Alaskans of the Week with an S. So pandemic or no pandemic, I think it's important still that we come down and recognize, particularly during these challenging times, people who are making a difference in our states and across our country. And as I mentioned last week, Mr. President, this pandemic is definitely testing the character of our nation. You might remember right when it was hitting, the Washington Post, some reporters wrote this story saying America's going to be tested and we don't think they're going to be able to pass. Maybe not like they have in World War II and other times. The mettle, the toughness, the resiliency of Americans might not be able to get us through this. That was the Washington Post, classic, clueless, inside the Beltway reporting. And what I said in remarks on the floor, this is about 6 weeks ago, you ought to come up to Alaska, Washington Post, and see my constituents. Or maybe come out with my Marines and see the Marines. You got to know America. And Alaska's America, and we're going to pass this test as a nation. And we are. All across the country, and certainly in my great state, in small rural villages, urban centers, from the tundra to the rainforest, all across the state, people are helping each other, passing out food, helping the elderly, making sure they're not lonely, tending to those in need, displaying generosity, strength, and amazing resilience. The paper should write more about that. Our frontline workers are now become our national heroes. Some of them are working day in and day out to ensure that our grocery stores are stocked, that the goods are transported, that the buildings are maintained, that our telecommunication systems are running, that our airplanes are flying, our hospitals are open, our community health centers are providing health with our healthcare workers. The list, as we all know, goes on and on and on. And because of them, back home, because of these great Americans all around our country, because of what's happening in my state with our state's leadership, Alaska has done well from a health standpoint in terms of this virus. Knock on wood, of course, and I'm doing it. Things could change. They can change anywhere. Certainly could change in Alaska, but so far so good. And Mr. President, you know, Alaskans are known for their rugged individualism. Alaskans are not naturally people who automatically follow orders without a good reason to do so. But almost everybody across our state has taken this virus seriously, helping one another, following the guidance that has been given by our state's leaders. And I chalk that up to good leadership from our very attentive mayors, city mayors, borough mayors, our local leaders across the state, to our governor, Mike Dunleavy, and the healthcare team he put together in his administration that was ready when this pandemic hit. So I'm going to talk about that healthcare team. It has been led by the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services, Adam Crum, and by Alaska's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Zink. So both of them are our Alaskans of the Week. Both of them have worked day and night throughout these past several weeks as this pandemic hit our nation, hit my state, and they've been trying around the clock to keep our fellow Alaskans safe. And as I mentioned, both are more than deserving of this very, very prestigious award. They have risen to the challenge in so many impressive ways to work for their state and their country. And Mr. President, as Alaskans do, both of them have interesting stories, interesting life stories, compelling life stories. So let me tell you a little bit about both of them. Adam Crum, he lives in Wasilla with his wife Colleen. He was born and raised in Alaska, grew up on the Kenai Peninsula, went to Homer High School, was a graduate there, good football player. He went to Northwestern and walked on the football team. That's Big Ten football. That takes a lot of guts. Center, guard, offensive lineman. Did great there. In fact, you look at the Crums, his siblings, they are a big family, impressive, a big group, brains and brawn in that family. Adam's three brothers all played college ball. Joey at Puget Sound, Richie at University of Idaho, Cody at West Texas A&M. Their dad also played at the University of Arkansas. Like I said, you line up the Crum brothers, you look like you got a serious pro football offensive line right there. Impressive family. So Adam enjoyed Northwestern, playing ball there, but on his first visit back home from college, he began to realize just how unique the great state of Alaska was where he grew up. As he said, for me, I really didn't appreciate it until I actually went someplace else. Like all of us, he loves the outdoors, the scenery, the diversity, the opportunities that beckon. And when he moved back from college, he was committed to coming back to our state to serve our state. He went into his family business, got his master's degree from Johns Hopkins University in public health, and then when Governor Dunleavy, who I mentioned, was elected in November 2018, Adam was offered the job of Commissioner of Health and Human Services. Now, his starting date was going to be December 3rd, 2018. But in Alaska, there's always adventure and challenges. And on November 30th, south central part of our state got hit with a huge shock, a huge earthquake, 7.1. Cracking and collapsing roads and highways, damaging buildings, destroying schools, knocking out power, sending people scrambling outside and under furniture, really damaging homes. So Adam, who was going to start this job in 3 days, said, I'm going to start now. Moved up his start date and got to work. It was a crash course in health emergency operations. His department, brand new on the job, Health and Human Services, was in touch with all the hospitals, all the prisons, the elder care facilities, the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. He watched and led these operations, everybody working together. And here's the miracle, Mr. President. This was a huge earthquake. During rush hour in Alaska, not one life was lost. Remarkable. Literally a miracle. And he learned how to bring people together in emergency operations. That exercise was invaluable with what came next, and we all know what came next, the pandemic, which has rocked our state, our country, really our world. Now, Alaska's chief medical officer, Dr. Ann Zink, appears with Commissioner Adam Crum and Governor Dunleavy nearly every night to address Alaskans in a press conference and our media about where we are with regard to the health of our state and this coronavirus. Now, versions of this scene happen nearly every night across the country as governors are addressing their public. But I'm going to venture to say that if there's a marker of success of such briefings, it's this: how much the people are trusting being what's told to them. And I would say Alaska's healthcare team, Commissioner Crum and Dr. Zink, pass with flying colors. And Dr. Zink is certainly one of the stars of this nightly show as she appears from her yurt in her backyard in Palmer, Alaska. She's become very popular in Alaska. There's even a Facebook page dedicated to her called Think Like Zink. Rory Watt is the Juneau city manager. He actually wrote an ode in her honor, a lengthy poem, and it starts like this. Oh, Alaska, I love you, and it feels like we are teetering on the brink. Who can guide and steer us at this time? The unflappable Dr. Zink. You know, if you have poems written about you, you're doing a good job. Dr. Zink was raised in Colorado with physician parents. She was no stranger to Alaska. She worked as a mountaineering guide in Alaska during college. So after getting her MD from Stanford, she made her way back to our great state 11 years ago and has worked as an ER doctor in the Matanuska Valley. Last July, she was with her family in Bhutan on a year-long sabbatical when she got a call from Adam Crum asking her to come to be the state's chief medical officer. Commissioner Crum said, quote, "She was my #1 draft pick." Speaking like a true Big Ten football player. So Commissioner Crum made that smart decision to bring on Dr. Zink, to bring her on to the medical team and healthcare team that he leads. Commissioner Crum and Dr. Zink have, along with the rest of the country, been closely watching the virus migrate from China to the United States, early stages. And you might remember what happened when the State Department brought our diplomats home from Wuhan. A plane load of our diplomats were coming home, and they had to stop in Alaska, in Anchorage, on January 28th for a refueling stop. Now, we later learned that nobody on the plane actually had the virus, but Commissioner Crum and Dr. Zink started to get our state ready. They prepared for the worst, contacting local and tribal medical facilities. They were in constant coordination with the CDC. They were in communications with all the state agencies and divisions, and very, very importantly, with the public. And this began their outreach to our citizens, and they've continued that frenzied pace ever since, working day and night with the governor's office to try their best to keep the virus at bay, to keep our citizens healthy, and so far, it's working. Like other places, Mr. President, businesses in Alaska have been shut down and are now slowly beginning to open back up. And we need to open back up. We need to keep our citizens healthy, but we need to get our economy open and moving again. Among the other precautions, the governor established a ban for a time on travel throughout the state and a 14-day quarantine still in place for anybody who comes from outside of Alaska to the state. Commissioner Crum said that mandate was probably the most effective thing they've done so far to keep the virus from spreading. But again, Mr. President, that doesn't mean it can't flare up in Alaska. It's flared up in other parts of our country. For example, we have some 200 villages that are not connected by roads, many of which do not have healthcare facilities. If they do, they're very, very limited. These communities were hit very hard by the Spanish flu. So there's a lot of trepidation in rural Alaska. We also have a fishing season that will start and begin to bring people from out of state, thousands of people, to work in Alaska. This is very important for our economy, but the communities need to feel safe. This is an issue I've raised with the President, with the Vice President, with the Chief of Staff, and to their credit, they have responded. As a matter of fact, right now, we have a doctor from DHS who's going around the state with Dr. Zink and others, who was sent there by Admiral Brent Greer, the HHS Assistant Secretary in charge of testing. They are all out there. They're going to be in Kodiak and Bristol Bay, Cordova, trying to make sure that our communities, our fishing communities, are ready. Now, the Admiral, when he called me, said, "We are working with the state, Senator Sullivan. This is direction from senior officials, the highest officials in the White House, to get out there and bring resources to your fishing communities." And I will say, working with Dr. Zink, she's one of the top medical officers in the country. This is Admiral Greer who's saying that about Dr. Zink. So, Mr. President, as you can tell, the utmost diligence is required. And so is planning, and so is communication and bringing people along, particularly when you're asking them to take extreme measures. And this, again, because of the leadership we have, is something that I think so far is going well in our state. As Commissioner Crum said, Alaskans are contrarian by nature. They want to be educated. They don't want to be forced. When they were told that it was the right thing to do to comply with mandates, that if we do this now, he said, it will hurt less later, Alaskans did this. Commissioner Crum continued, "It was the most painful thing I've ever done, asking people to close their businesses, but not as painful as it was for the people who actually had to shut down their businesses. Very painful. But Alaskans complied to try to take care of the overall health of the population, and we worked together." That's what Commissioner Crum said. Mr. President, true leaders emerge during times of crisis, and we are grateful that these two leaders emerged for us in Alaska. They are working along with the governor and the rest of his team, doing a very, very good job for our state. Like I said, we aren't past this. We have enormous economic challenges in our nation and huge economic challenges in our state. But we know a few things. We have good people at the top who are guiding us, and we know that Alaskans will do the right thing when they are asked by these people. We also know that we are resilient. Our state is, our people are, and our nation is. In a recent interview, Dr. Zink said that one of her big takeaways throughout this entire pandemic is just how important resilience is and how very, very resilient Alaska is. She said, quote, "Adversity can bring out the best or the worst in people, and we have a choice to grow in response to the challenges or crumble from them." Well, Mr. President, as I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, I'm convinced that Alaska will grow from these challenges, that America will grow from these challenges. I'm convinced that what we're seeing all around our state and our nation, the amazing generosity, people working together, difficult times, we will emerge stronger and more resilient. So I want to thank two leaders in our state who are responsible in many ways for getting us through so far so good. On the health side, Commissioner Crum and Dr. Zink, thank you for your service. Thank you for your hard work, your sacrifice. Thank you for stepping up. And congratulations on being our Alaskans of the Week.